Hello, Evangel. This is Pastor Ben alongside Pastor Rich and Pastor Jordan, and this is the Next Gen Podcast.
How's it going, Evangel? This is Pastor Rich, and thank you for tuning in to the Next Gen Podcast once again. And I have to say that I'm really looking forward to exploring this topic. I think it's very practical. I think that it is something that could be very useful for all of us, no matter what age group it is, genuinely, whether it's, children, young adults, grandparents, whatever it is. This is something that not only do I think it's important for us, but when we're able to healthily model spiritual discipline, that is something that we can pass down and it can be extremely beneficial. But that does beg the question, what is spiritual discipline? It's not like discipline in the way that it's like, like capital punishment. It's not like, it's not like punishment. It's not anything like that. But spiritual discipline is spiritual habits that we have in our lives that keeps us in line with Christ, is what I would say it is. And I don't know if my two co-hosts have another definition, but that's what I would say, is that it is a daily habit. It's a discipline. It's many ways, it's even an attitude of how you keep your spiritual health journey where it needs to be. I don't know if any of you would want to add to that definition, or we can go straight into our discussion, but that's how I would define it.
I found a good one from Desiring God, I think is good, desiringgod.org. It says, the spiritual disciplines are those practices found in Scripture that promote spiritual growth among believers in the gospel of Jesus Christ. They are habits of devotion, habits of experiential Christianity that have been practiced by God's people since biblical times. I like that.
I really like that, anchoring it in the Word of God.
Yeah, like something that's sustained us for a while. It's not like, because like a spiritual discipline like today could be like, like you could like spin it into whatever you want. But I'm glad that in that definition it kind of talks about like this has kept God's people connected and in devotion with Christ since biblical times, like since the beginning of our faith. So yeah, I think that's good.
And that kind of goes hand in hand with what I was going to bring up, was talking about like this past Sunday, we heard Caitlin Camerata give her little brief, short sermon.
Yep.
And to me, I was going to bring up the fact that, she said, since the beginning of time, we are people of habit, right? We are people of routine. We have always been that way. But I think, not to get too far ahead, but one of the big parts that we kind of miss out too is the motivation behind it, right? We're not doing these routine things or having spiritual discipline to just check off the list, but having that good motivation behind it as well.
Yeah.
So
it's good.
All right. Well, I think we can just jump straight in. So what we wanted to start off with is, again, really kind of exposing what spiritual discipline is. I think maybe it's a little bit less of a loaded term than maybe I think, but I don't know, I can often feel like maybe especially in our younger generation, we can hear like spiritual discipline and we're like, oh God, like that doesn't sound fun, that sounds lame, tiresome, and it is work, but maybe it's not quite like that. Maybe it's actually something that's extremely beneficial to us, but we do have to have the right motivations and intentions, like Pastor Ben said.
Well, I think because another word I think about is like people are like, oh, that's boring. And it's like, all right, well, we do live in the most overstimulated time probably on earth ever. So I think like a lot of that, like I don't really know what word to call it, but like we're spoiled, like just with so much entertainment. Like last night it was so stupid. I'm like tired and I got home from church and I was making something to eat. And I had the Yankees game on an iPad, and then I was scrolling on my phone and texting somebody. And I'm like, this is too much, like I can't even give my attention. So I think it's like the word I've been thinking about as you were talking, Pastor Rich, is like it's grounding. Like it grounds you back to kind of the important roots and stuff. So I think like people that come with the perspective of like, oh, that's boring, that's not, well, I would just say that you don't see the value in it, and that's what needs to be changed.
Yeah, I mean, do I find a lot of joy from brushing my teeth in the morning? No.
Actually,
is it good
I
for
do.
me?
I love it.
You do. But it's one of those things that like, yeah, it might be boring, but it's something that I need to do for my own health, right? So that's the part too that, a lot of the stuff we think of as monotonous or it is boring, right? But we don't need to be stimulated 24/7.
Yeah.
But I do think it is also possible to be stimulated
Oh,
in,
absolutely.
right? And there's a lot of joy found
Yeah.
in spiritual discipline as well. So
Mhm.
I think a lot of it is like kind of what Pastor Rich was saying with like the heart towards it. I think some people have an attitude towards the words spiritual discipline, and then that flows into the actual activity itself.
Yeah.
Now I've got an attitude to, well, I just can't figure out the Bible. Well, like prayer doesn't even work. You know, like you start kind of like worship's dumb, right? Like I think we bring that attitude into our perspective on what spiritual discipline is, and we need to let God change that.
I even think too that, not to stay here for, super long, but I even think that, I can even speak for myself, people my age. Oftentimes I hear that these kinds of words like spiritual discipline, stuff like that, can often bring up like a legalistic mindset. Like I feel like whether it's like an overbearing parent or, grandparent being like, you need to do this. It's like, and I feel like sometimes that's all we can hear is of like, I don't want to check off a box. Like I want to like open the Bible like when the Spirit leads me to it. It's like, okay, yes, no, but we can't have that attitude. It's too extreme to just push it all the way over to the side because maybe you had an experience like that.
We'll use the metaphor of eating though. Like sometimes I go and I eat and I like really enjoy it and I go to like a restaurant or whatever. Sometimes I just eat because I'm hungry. Like, and I think when it comes to spiritual discipline, it's that vital. It's that important. And like we're all sitting around this table right now. It's almost lunchtime. The three of us are starving. And I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat and I'm thinking and I'm looking forward to doing that and to having the nourishment and to seeing what it does in my life. And, like if I didn't eat lunch today and then we go to softball tonight, I'm like, I'm going to be dragging. So it's the same thing. It's really, it's just a different thing. It's not entertainment. Yep. Like I think that's really kind of the basis of it. The more I kind of flesh it out is like, this isn't entertainment. This is nourishment. Mm-hmm. That's the difference. Yeah, and we're so focused on entertainment that we don't even like, but back in the old days, right? Finding food was a big thing. It wasn't like you just go to a store. That was life or death.
Yeah.
And so I think looking at spiritual disciplines as spiritual life or death, changing our perspective on it. If I'm not doing that, I'm going to be spiritually dead. And I remember my wife, she shared at Kids Church once, I think this was like before Pastor Rich came, and it was kind of that little season where we were looking for somebody. And she said, it would be like, just like, can you imagine if your actual eating was tied to your Bible reading, your praying, your spiritual disciplines? Like you wouldn't live very long. And sometimes we, pop in a devotional once a week. Like, can you imagine just like going through a week and all you have is a multivitamin to eat, like on Thursday? Like, it doesn't make sense. It's laughable, but we're like, oh, I just feel so far from God. And it's like, we haven't done anything, man. Like we haven't nourished that relationship at all. So,
well, I think that this topic of our attitudes is something that is going to be an important part of this conversation. But what I wanted us to do as well, and maybe this can kind of tie in, with it too, is what does spiritual discipline look like for you guys? What does it look like for you on a daily basis? Again, we're saying a lot about it, but again, to really further solidify, okay, this is what it actually is. Pastor Jordan or Pastor Ben, what does spiritual discipline look like for you?
Cause we kind of talked about some routine, maybe like some habits that you have, right? I remember, not to sidetrack from the question now, but I remembered in a time of my life where I was struggling to have that spiritual discipline. I kind of had to train myself to have that, right? So I remember, I think I was 18 or 19, and it was kind of like it was 19. It was right after I redevoted my life to Christ. I was like, God should be in everything, right? So what I did was I set an alarm for every hour on my phone to condition myself, think about Jesus, right? Now, it's not something that is like our nature maybe always to be like, oh, well, let me bring it back to God. But that was something that I kind of instilled in myself to try to remind myself like, oh, remember, it always comes back to Jesus. Like God is in this. And honestly, that's something that I'm thankful that I did before, because now I see the importance of God in things that, and maybe sometimes some people might look at it and be like, well, maybe you're over spiritualizing a little bit. Maybe I am at times, but that's just where the importance of that is for me. If we're talking about like a routine, like a daily routine, something like that for me, and I've talked about this a little bit before, might be like I wake up in the morning and, before my feet even hit the ground, like I'm praying, right? And sometimes like I might have to sit on the side of my bed because I might fall back asleep, right? So adapting to certain things. But honestly, like to me, I think, and it's different for everybody. Some people are more efficient later at night. Some people are more efficient in the morning. Whatever works for you. I like to start my day off right. Like I like to start my day off in the Word, start my day off with God. That usually starts with prayer, and then that will go to devotions, and whether I'm just reading the Bible or reading a plan or something. But also being sensitive to what God is saying to me, right? It's not just, all right, well, I'm going to do this stuff to check off the list. It's like, God, what do you want for me today? What is the momentum? What is the direction that you want to guide me in? Lord, like, help me be sensitive to those things. So it might not look the same way every single day. It might not look the same way every week, but there are those bare bone kind of that format for me.
No, that's awesome. For me, it's something that, and I want to talk about the attitude thing later, but when it comes to like the actual day-to-day stuff and the routine, I really find that, as you said, like I really just resonate with, I have to start my day right. You know, and sometimes I think a lot of people may even have the expectation, and you have to be careful that like if you don't do that, you don't just give up, you don't just like focus on the fact that like, oh, you missed it, so what's the point? But I just view the reading of the word, worship, prayer, like spending that time with God, whatever avenue that is. Hopefully, I try to incorporate those main three things. You know, like you doing the church devo that we have together. You know, commenting on it, forcing myself to really digest it, so I can't just like look at it and be like, oh, nice, and then you know, it's like that's it, right? I want to extend that abiding time as much as possible. Another way that can look like is, you know, through prayer. I keep a list in my phone of people that I pray for, which I remember when I was younger, I was like, oh, if I was really spiritually disciplined, I wouldn't need a list. but you know, and whatever. But for me, I realized I'm like, you know, that's very helpful because I don't want to miss anybody. You know, I don't want to be in my, you know, stupor of like not sleeping very well and then just being like, all right, amen. You know, I want to get everybody as possible. And then honestly, something as simple as like when I'm in the shower or when I'm like trying to do stuff around the house, or if I take that moment and I go and be alone, putting on worship music and just really trying to connect. And I think that really that's the main goal of all of this, which I hope that doesn't get lost. So we're not doing it so that, you know, we're not doing that so we get something out of God. Like I want to do those things so I can be with God, and I need to be. Like it's both and. Like it's like, yes, I want to do it so I'm not, you know, an even more piece of garbage in my life, right? Like I need that discipline, and I need to be connected, because if I'm not, I'm going to be a drastically different person, right? Whether I realize it or not. But the point of it is to abide with Jesus and to be with him. But that's just one example of the way that can look like. And we've talked about before, you know, different prayers that you can say, but I think you can get the picture from what I'm saying. Pastor Jordan.
Yeah, so for me, it's the same as you guys both said. The morning is best for me. I've got kids, so you know it just gets in. You put them to bed. There's a whole routine for that, and then you're just dead. I don't want God to get my leftovers. That's kind of my heart behind it. So what I do is I'll do it in the morning, and for me, I read first. Just to get because that's what the question is here, is we're talking about what does it look like. We'll get into the details and the why later, but for me, I have to read first because I just feel like it kind of, to quote Tony Hoisington a little bit, it just kind of tills up the soil in my heart, because I'm just not naturally thinking about, oh, I can't wait to intercede for the nations, you know. So I'm just being honest. I'm doing 2 Bible plans right now with the church. I'm doing the whole Bible and I'm doing the whole New Testament in a year. So that takes for me anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes. I think it's a total of 6 to 8 chapters each day. And then what I do is I actually have a minimum word count that I have to write for each one. So in each plan, I write a certain amount for each one to force myself to find something, because naturally, again, it's easy to check the box, as Pastor Rich was alluding to. So I do that to really process. I do that for myself to, you know, other people can see it, of course, but I do that for myself to force myself to find something. And then I turn to prayer, and for me, it can look different every day. It's not always the same, but I do have a list as well, as Pastor Rich also said he does, Because for me, I'm just a human, man. I'm not thinking about every single person, but I want to be able to look at that person on Sunday morning and say, I've prayed for you this week. I don't want to just be like, oh yeah, praying for you. Like, dude, don't say that unless you're doing it. Like, I'm sorry.
I'm with you, because honestly, when you tell somebody like, hey, I prayed for this specifically for you, you can see the difference, because it's like, well, yeah, actually, like, I can tell you prayed for me.
It's almost like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
It's almost like, all right, yeah, man, praying for you. Like, it's like, yeah. So
I get.
Care how I'm doing, or are you just saying that because it's
exactly. So I just don't want it to be a cliche. So I do that, and then I try to do quiet time with the Lord. This is something I learned from Pete Scazzero. I highly recommend his book, to Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. And for that book, he talks a lot about silence and stillness before the Lord. So just having a period of time where you're not saying anything. So when I started doing that, I literally would set a timer on my phone for 1 minute, because that's all I could handle.
Yeah.
And
we talk about the overstimulation.
Yeah.
For if you haven't tried doing that, it's
very hard. It's very hard. And so for that, I would begin with that, and then anytime my mind would wander, I would just say the word Jesus and just bring myself back. But I wouldn't say anything else, and then that's grown over time to longer and longer time periods. So for me, I just think that's a crucial part for my spiritual discipline that's made a big difference, that I think a lot of people in our world today aren't aware of and aren't doing it, because we don't even know about it. But it's something that, like, since the church fathers, has sustained the church for thousands of years. That stillness and silence, that solitude before the Lord, really trying to get out of the one-way conversations where I'm just talking and telling God what I need. But I'm taking a period of time where I'm now stepping back and allowing him to speak to me. So, but after that, I work out and I put worship on, and I have a deal with God now that it doesn't matter what my fitness goals are. I can stop in the middle of my set and just start singing and putting my hands up and falling on my knees, whatever it looks like. Like, I will stop that time and just worship, and the benefit for me is I work out at home, so I can do that. Kind of weird.
In a public.
You can do it at a gym if you want. Yeah. And then on my way to work, I got about a 25-minute commute, so I listen to a sermon on the way to work. So I listen to a sermon every day because I just need it. So,
I wanted to ask, because this is something that I don't know if you mentioned this on the podcast before, just really quick. Where do you look for that? Is that something you find in podcasts, or do you do you have people that you YouTube, preachers? How do you do that?
Yeah. So for me, for convenience sake, all of mine are on podcast format. So the Apple Podcast, you can set up for them to auto download, because kind of on my way to work, there's a little dead spot where if it's not downloaded, it could give me problems. So they automatically download the 3 most recent or whatever. So I have them on here, and then I'll just put headphones in and listen. So I listen. I'll just quickly throw them out to you.
I want names.
Yeah. So Summit Life with JD Greer. I really like JD a lot. And then Tim Keller, he releases about 2 or 3 a week. Francis Chan on his Crazy Love podcast is 2 a week. I listen to Ask Pastor John too. Those are less sermons and just more conversation. I listen to The Village Church with Matt Chandler. So, and then I expound out from there too, and I'll get other ones. But those are my primary ones.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I've always wondered about that. And I always love that you always say that, those things can't replace church, but when you can add them to your life, it is extremely, extremely beneficial.
Well, I've talked to people about it, and the reason why I say this now is because I had somebody tell me this once. They're like, well, I'm just not spiritual enough to listen to a sermon every day. And I'm like, all right, well, here's the deal. The reason why I listen to a sermon every day is because I'm so unspiritual.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because I am a spiritual person. It's because I'm that much of a mess that I can't do 1 sermon a week on Sunday. Yeah. I need a sermon every day because I'm so freaking lost. And I've just got a lot of work to do in my heart. And so, so that's kind of the heart behind it. It's not this like, well, I'm just gonna. It really goes back to the attitude. We talked about this, you and I, like 6 months ago. I don't feel like you'll care if I put you on blast a little bit, Rich. But we talked about this, and you were just like, yeah, just kind of going through a dry spell, which we all do, and I've been there.
Even pastor,
even recently, yeah. And I remember I told you, and felt like a light bulb came on for you. I was just like, dude, don't go in with any motives. Like, don't go in and be like, what am I going to get? You know, just like you alluded to, or no, you said when you were talking, you said, I don't go in there to get this knowledge, but just to be with him. And I think that will really change a lot of people's devotional life.
Yeah.
You're not going in to be a Bible scholar and I don't know, just like know all the facts for, you're not on a Bible quiz team, and I love Bible quiz, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I just feel like that was a big distinction for you, and it was for me too.
Well, I think we can even with that transition to the next part. We're like, how did you get there? And then any potential resources. And immediately I can just say one potential resource is like reaching out to people that because like Pastor Jordan, just be honest, like you have a spiritually disciplined life that I want to emulate. Like I hear, and I know it's authentic, right? I'm not trying to gas you up because we're on a podcast, but like I literally hear that, I'm like, that's what I want to do. Like I'm not gonna ask somebody that I don't think they're doing it either. Like I'll confide in them, sure, but like I'm not getting anywhere. So doing that, finding somebody that you're like, you know what, they have this together, and they're not in a place where you're like, oh, well, if you want to be like me, you need to, it's like, no, you're just like, I need to do this, and that's kind of the attitude that I've been able to get from that. Another great resource is actually a resource that Pastor Ben gave out, something that we loved at Valley Forge. It's the Follow Book. It's Dan McNaughton, and very, very phenomenal.
His last name is Gook?
Cook.
Oh.
Cook. Not Gook, sorry. Sore throat.
Well, I can.
Sounds weird.
Yeah, he's definitely listening too. So he'll be like, "What?"
Oh
yeah, he's definitely. Thanks for checking us out, man.
But we can link that too. And honestly, like I can't recommend it. But the main thing that I got from not only that, but Valley
Can't
Forge,
recommend it. I can't recommend it.
What
enough.
did I say?
I can't recommend it.
Yeah, no,
That's fine. That's fine.
no, thanks for the correction.
Yeah.
I can't recommend it enough. And one of the main things from that, and it's honestly a lot of the culture of Valley Forge is built around the principles in that book, is that talks about, in John 15, you like when you abide with Jesus, right? The metaphor they use, like the vine and the branches, the way that the Bible puts it is, or actually the way that Jesus puts it, so like if you do not spend time with me, like in the metaphor they use is like you will die.
Yeah.
Like there's no source of power for you.
Yep.
There is no source of comfort. There is, it says like if you're apart from me, like you will die. In fact, another way that puts it, it's one of the Bible verses that goes through my mind all the time when I'm being an idiot, and it's often trying to solve my problems myself. So apart from me, you can do nothing.
Yeah.
And so I even think like if you have, because that's the side of spiritual discipline that I think the older generation has tried to communicate, is that like, no, you need to do this. And I don't know if it's something that just got lost, but I feel like we heard that and we're like, oh, legalism, blah, blah, blah. I want to, be free. And it's like, okay, yes, you don't want to be inauthentic, check off the box. But at the end of the day, what the truth is? If we're not in there and we're not doing that, like, and the sad thing is we won't even know that we're dying.
It's like, kind of like saying, like, I don't want to be legalistic with my 3 meals a day.
Yeah.
I'd rather just be free. And it's like, okay, but you got to eat.
Yeah.
Or you're going to die.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
he's pretty straight up about it, too. He doesn't beat around the bush.
No.
On the vine, I guess.
I want to go back to your point.
Sorry.
I want to go back to your point earlier, too. You were just talking about emulating people. But I think, like, and I appreciate what you said, but I think it's also important to realize that, like, we're all in different stages of life and different stages of our spiritual journey, to where for some people, you're starting this process, and you shouldn't be looking at like, oh, I got to read 8 chapters. I got to pray for half an hour. That's just not realistic. Mm-hmm. And I think, I just think we need to also just see where we're at. And like, I look at my dad's spiritual disciplines in his life, and it's like, whoa, like for me, I started doing this when I was 17, right? Like I'm 29 now. So like this is 12 years of like really intentional trying to get to this place in my life. And so, and I'm not saying don't have big goals, don't have big aspirations. You should have big goals and big aspirations for yourself. Read the Bible in a year, those kinds of things. But I'm just saying that to say that like we all are in process, and we are all trying to work this out, and what this will look like for us as we go forward. So just to have grace for ourselves as we're learning, and treat it like a muscle that we're trying to grow, and to just be like, all right, I'm going to run a marathon. It's like, well, if I tell you you're going to run a marathon in a year, like you've got a lot of time to get to that place to where it might be possible.
And honestly, for some of us, and for me particular, like you might say, well, I didn't have that modeled for me. I maybe don't know what that looks like. And that's not any dismay to, the situation that we grew up in or whatever it is. But we keep going back to this conditioning piece, right? Like Pastor Jordan, you brought up how like, your time that you spent in silence was started out at a minute because that's all you could do.
Yep.
Right. But now it's much more than that. Some of these things we kind of have to develop on our own, right? We have to just kind of do repetition, do like practice, really, if anything. Just take that time to really set aside whatever's going on. And like, maybe all we can do is sit in prayer for 5 minutes, right? As a whole, maybe that's what you can do at first.
Yep.
But as you kind of spend your relationship with God, like my relationship with, God isn't going to be the same as Pastor Jordan's relationship with God. So part of that is discovering like, what is your method, what you can do, what works for you, right? Like for me, I realize that like I have to say like, God, I don't know like what I need for the day. Like you prepare me, right? And that's not going to be the same thing that somebody else like prays, So like you have to start somewhere, and there is a reason why we have a routine and a format. And I think obviously the inexcusable parts are removing the Bible. Like you need to have the Bible.
Yep.
You need to have prayer.
Yep.
So I'm not saying that, if like, I don't resonate with, I don't need the Bible. Like that's not what I'm saying at all.
Yeah.
My way of being disciplined with God is going to Starbucks.
Yeah.
And
It just sitting there
sitting
in
at the
silence,
bench and
meditating.
just taking a deep breath. Like,
No.
Although probably a good idea.
Well, yeah, but there's a lot of resources out there for us too.
Yeah.
And you need to also see that, I think what Pastor Ben's kind of getting to is like sometimes life is seasonal.
Yep.
Like there's sometimes where the prayer list is great for me, and there's sometimes where I've got a journal, do a prayer journal. There's times where, listen, like I know Pentecostals are going to shake their boots to hear this, but prayer books.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried a prayer book? I mean, for people that are trying to figure out, prayer, I just don't have a good system or whatever. Like, listen, man, I know it's a more Lutheran or any of those kinds of more, more liturgical. Thank you. With the more liturgical sects of our Christianity in our faith, those have sustained Christian men and women of God for hundreds and hundreds of years. And we should use them,
Some of the greatest Christian resources we have are literally just people's prayer journals.
Yeah.
Like there's some of like it is so beneficial that are like, oh well, I'll just publish it.
Yep.
Like and not to say that that's the mark of it being powerful or not, but it gives some credence to it.
Yeah. Well, this is what I'll recommend, because we're on the resources part before we go to our last piece here. Is it's called the Daily Office. It's a free app. Download the Daily Office. It's got a whole plan for you to do. And you know what? It may feel so mechanical and liturgical at first, but just do it to just learn a flow of how to pray. It has verses in it. It has things that you say the Lord's Prayer, you say the Apostles' Creed. It just brings you to a place to receive. And for some people that are like, look, I'm lost with prayer. Well, get in line. That's most of us. This can give you something, and then maybe you stick with it. Maybe you don't, but do it for like a month.
Yeah.
Just get some rhythm. Just get a movement and a plan to go forward. So, some obstacles we were going to talk about.
Yeah, I think one of the main obstacles I alluded to it before was it really was my attitude going into it. I always thought that it was always like, oh, I'm checking off a box. I don't really want to fake it, so I'm just gonna do it, when it feels right. It's like, no, that's not helpful. At least it wasn't for me, but it has to be something that's, if I didn't make time for God, the time was gonna get filled up. Like I've learned that I can't just like coincidentally have time with God. If I don't schedule it, it doesn't have to be like 7:05, like whatever. But if I'm not like, if I'm doing this in the morning, if I didn't do that, it just wasn't gonna happen.
Yeah. Well, this just came to me. I don't even know that. I'm sure someone has said this in a more succinct way, but like convenient Christianity is not real. It's not. Like Jesus, him going on the cross was not convenient for you. Him coming down and like all of this, it's not convenient. And like you're talking about, it'll find time. Like it's a conveniency thing. And I think for me, that's what I see a lot of people is it's just not a priority. People say all the time. I was talking with someone literally yesterday, and I don't have time to do that. And it's like, no, you don't prioritize it. That's the real answer.
You gotta make time.
Yeah. It's
Find time.
exactly. Who finds time, right? Like unless you're being intentional, it doesn't just drop into your lap. And so I asked this person, I said, could you get up half an hour earlier? Well, yeah, I could. Okay. Could you stay up half an hour later? Well, I guess. Like he's telling me a schedule, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a lot. But you know what? Like, there's time where you're sitting and you're doing something else, TV, entertainment, whatever. And so the reality when it comes to spiritual discipline is you have to make it a priority in your life.
Well, I think at the end of the day, too, I really wish I remembered what preacher said this. It was at Valley Forge, and they said, like, you're going to make time for the creator of time.
Yeah.
Like, you really can't. Like,
That's good.
like, dude made time, and you're like, and listen, like, honestly, like, and I don't want people to hear that and be like, oh, well, trust me, like, life can be extremely busy, especially in America. Like,
I don't think you need to soften this point.
No. But
I really
but
don't.
it's less of like, it's not like, oh, a person's like, that's a bad person. It's that they have no idea what the value of doing that. Like, if it was viewed like how we eat, Deuteronomy, it talks about that the law of the Lord was the very life of Israel.
Yep.
And we think, like, oh, it's not true for me. It's like, no, it is. Like, if you viewed it like that,
Yeah.
and it's not easy, but you'd be getting up.
We take time to breathe.
I make time to eat. I put financial resources to eat.
Yeah.
I put financial resources to
it's
play
important.
video games.
Yeah. Sure.
And why not? I don't know, it's financial, whatever, but why not do that with spending time with the person
Yeah.
that loves you more than anything you could ever run into in this world?
And I think another piece for the obstacles is do we find any value in this? Because I think that is actually at the heart of a lot of people is I actually don't see any value in this. This doesn't work. That's why I don't make time for it. Because they think, oh, this is an inconvenience. Like, I'm wasting my time praying. I'm wasting my time reading because I don't get it. I'm wasting my time praying because I just pray and it bounces off the ceiling. I waste my time with worship because my heart's not in it. It's like, whoa, you don't see value in those things. That's why you're not making time for it. Like, I see value in a lot of the relationships in my life, and I make like I have kids, you know, like just the two guys in the room with me, like they're closer friends for me. Like, I make time to spend time with them. It's really hard for me to have time when you have kids and you live half an hour away and I work full time and, you know, and I'm married, right? But like, I make time for the relationships that are valuable to me.
Yeah.
That's what I do, because they bring value to my life.
Absolutely.
And so I actually think that is an obstacle for a lot of people is you actually don't think this has any value, do you?
Yeah. And you know what? Honestly, on the antithesis of it too, as somebody who has a very wicked heart, in high school, I knew I did this a lot of the time, was like, I would intentionally do this time, so like spend this time with God, knowing that it would, you know, or maybe not knowing, but hoping like, oh, my life is going to go better now because spending that time with God.
You owe me.
Yeah.
Transactional.
Exactly. They're like, oh, I'm in God's will, so like things are going to go better for me. That was my motivation. That was where my heart was at. Yeah. And I realized that, no, that's not how it goes, right? A relationship goes two ways.
Yep.
Right? So you saying like God has given his time for you, right?
Yeah.
The creator of time, as you said. But for me, I can't even wake up 20 to 30 minutes earlier because I'm less comfortable.
Well, and it's a perspective change too. Like you say that where, okay, stuff's going really bad.
Mm-hmm.
God's going to get me through it because I'm plugged in. Now it changes. It's not stuff's going really bad. I got to earn his favor by doing this stuff so I'll be blessed.
Yep. It's,
well, you know what? Whether you do it or not, kind of like the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whether God saves us or not.
Yep.
Like, I'm not doing this, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And whether my life is blessed and everything's whatever or not, I know that I need this because I need him every single day.
Yeah. If there was anything, and maybe just to wrap up, if there was anything that I wish I could communicate with with this topic, is that it is impossible for spending time with, you know, the lover of your soul, the one that created you, right? And the Bible talks about that God rejoices over you. It's singing and dancing, like God loves you. And this is not about checking a box. This is not about making an angry God love you if you like read his book. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Like if we view it as just being like, you're going through stuff and it's just like, God, I'm at the end of my rope, but at least I have you.
Yeah.
You know, and we get that value and we see that, like that is going to that's not going to make our circumstances better. That's going to change us in the midst of our circumstances. And that's way valuable. That's way more valuable than just being like, oh, God fixed my stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I'm going to bring you through this.
Yep.
We're going to do this together. And that's where I'd want us to be. Like, let's move away from the legalistic
Yeah.
and feeling like I have to.
Yeah.
It's the I get to.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're going to wrap up here because next week we're going to talk actually about stewarding your time. And I think this coincides really well with what we were talking about. So we're going to cut it off here. Thank you so much for listening. Again, if you are looking for more tips on spiritual discipline, routine, hey, I need help with this, practical advice, any of the pastors in the church would love to talk with you. Any of our ministry leaders would want to talk with you. And I would encourage you to reach out to somebody. Hey, maybe this week, make it a goal for you this week. Talk to somebody. What does your spiritual discipline look like? What does it look like in your life? And just have a conversation with somebody. It doesn't have to be long. You don't have to match them where they're at, but just start talking about it so that you can maybe get some ideas on how to grow in yours, because we can always be better and take more steps towards Him. So thank you so much for checking us out, and we'll see you next week.